Hi, this is That Wrestling Wench. My name is Alexa. Welcome to the show.
Look at this! Oh, you're kidding me. Michaels, are you going to try to beat Bret Hart with a sharpshooter? Yes, he is! Are you kidding me? What?
Think I'm key. I know I'm sexy.
Sharpshooter has become the WWF champion, and Bret Hart is in disbelief.
I reached around to grab Sean's leg, and I could hear someone say, "Ring the bell." That's when I knew it was Vince McMahon. I finally realized that they screwed me. They really screwed me, the lousy bastards.
In today's episode, I want to continue my conversation about kayfabe and the constructing and deconstructing of realities that professional wrestling provides its fans. And from last week, talking about the Montreal Screwjob, I kind of wanted to move on to another infamous moment in wrestling history. And to do that, I wanted the help of another person. So I'm going to be trying something a little bit different than I usually do. So today we have a special guest. He is the music producer for this podcast, this very show, and he is my boyfriend, and his name is Kreider.
Hello there, everybody.
How are you doing today?
Lovely. Happy 4th of July to everyone.
Oh, God. Well, it's not coming out today, so we're just recording.
4th of July. That's how I'm feeling.
Born on the 4th of July. I thought maybe I should get a real man up in this bitch to talk about men's wrestling with, because I don't know if I'm qualified to do that. I talk about women, you know?
Indeed.
So today we are going to be talking about the infamous Montreal Screwjob. What are your first impressions when I mention Montreal Screwjob?
Spit on Vince McMahon's face.
Yeah, that's very true. I think that a lot of us think that. I guess we'll just really jump in.
Okay.
Is there anything else you want to say about Bret Hart, or?
He's the best there ever was, the best there ever will be.
Is that what you think?
That's what he thinks, I mean, maybe I think it too, but...
You think about Natty more so?
Sure.
Oh, okay. Well, we're having toxic opinions up in this bitch immediately. Okay, so the Montreal Screwjob. Obviously, this surrounds the famous Hart family. Wrestling is so well known for its dynasties, and the Hart family is one of the biggest for sure, I feel like, next to, the Anoa'i family or something.
Or, as Cody Rhodes says, there's more than one royal family in wrestling.
Yes, there is, but yeah. I don't know. I mean, yes, he does come from wrestling royalty as well. You're right. So Stu Hart was the patriarch of the Hart family, and he started Stampede Wrestling, which was a promotion based in Canada. Calgary, Kreider?
Sure, sounds good to me.
I think it's Calgary, Alberta, Canada.
We'll run with it.
And the Canadians are going to come for us. And because he started this, his wrestling career, and then had a full litter of wrestling children, that he kind of continued this full promotion for a long time and passed down these attributes to his sons. And one of them was Bret Hart, or is Bret Hart. He's still alive. I'm sorry. So Stu Hart, though, was a consummate teacher. He taught wrestling in the dungeon,
as we know,
the Hart family dungeon, into his 70s. And Bret had started incredibly early and was the family star pupil pretty early on, because I think he's one of the elder sons, if I'm not right. I know Owen, obviously.
Sounds good to me. I believe it.
I mean, Owen came in afterwards, of course, but so. And after Bret had started a tag team with the famous Jim Neidhart, Natalia's father, and WWF acquired Stampede Wrestling, the two were tag team stars. They were top tag team talent. And Vince had been going kind of through monopolizing all of wrestling for the last like 10 years or so, kind of since his dad handed him the business.
Gave him the keys to the kingdom.
Yes, when he gave him the keys to the kingdom, he started to plant all of these seeds that would end up in the monopolization of professional wrestling industry. And Vince hadn't really dealt with much competition after acquiring all of these other territories and stuff until WCW came around. WCW became an actual threat to Vince McMahon's, like
Safety.
yes, his hierarchy,
Financial safety.
financial. And after the Monday Night Wars really started, and Alundra Blaze, Medusa, threw her WWF Women's Championship belt into the trash on live TV and on WCW, there was like a real, ratings battle that was happening between the two companies.
Indeed.
Around this time, Kevin Nash and Scott Hall had just left WWF to go to WCW, and that was a really big loss for Vince, apparently. And
Apparently.
It was a big loss for Vince.
Yeah, it was.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
absolutely.
And the curtain call had kind of been happened. It had happened.
Had come and gone.
It had happened right now. No, like
okay.
The with the moment where they all hug.
Yeah, where they hug. Yeah.
So they had done that, and there was like this weird kayfabe break moment. I talked about that in one of my first episodes on this series, and it was kind of like a weird thing. Vince knew that he was getting, like, his talent was being poached, basically, is how he felt about it. I think they're just going to a better opportunity. Eric Bischoff was paying them so much money. I do not understand how you'd be able to say no.
Yes.
But when it came to Bret's contract, it was 1996, and his contract was coming to a close. Eric Bischoff offered him a big number to go to WCW.
Yeah, several million.
Yeah. And
For like not that long.
For way shorter amount of time.
I think Vince offered him like, it was like 2.5 million for like 20 years or something like that. Like,
no, it's more, but I'll get to that,
we'll
I
get
promise.
there. Okay.
So a lot of the information that I got from this is either the Dark Side of the Ring on Montreal Screwjob
Heard.
and also Josie Reisman's book on
Yes.
Ringmaster, which is really incredible, and I recommend it to anybody who loves wrestling. So knowing that Bret was one of the main draws for WWF in the mid-90s, he knew he had so much more leverage than Vince was letting him in on, like with this new contract coming up. He wanted to take his time, and when Vince invited Bret to go to his home in Greenwich, he had just built this like huge mansion there, and Bret told him he wasn't ready to sign. He told him to his face. And Bret said that when he left Vince's that night, Vince looked at him and said, "You're much smarter than people give you credit for." So that's a shitty thing to say to somebody, I think, and a little bit indicative of how Vince feels about all of the people that work for him.
That's how he chooses to do business.
After this, Bret told Vince that he wanted a break to really figure out what he needed to do, and Vince wasn't hearing from him after about a month after this meeting, and he chartered a flight to Calgary to talk with him in person. And throughout this whole story, there's so many, like, chartered a flight, and I'm like, if you just didn't charter a flight, you could have paid everybody more. Just saying.
Indeed.
It's the fucking 90s. Like, that's so much money. So sorry. But so Vince chartered a flight to Calgary to talk with Bret, and this is when Bret told him the tea that Eric Bischoff was offering him $3 million a year, and he would be working 180 days per year also.
So what was the figure again?
It's $3 million a year.
Yeah.
And the contract is 3 years, so it's $9 million.
Okay.
Almost $10 million in 3 years. And he told Vince basically, like, I can't pass that up. Like, that I have a family to feed. I care about my body. Like, I don't want to, I can't say no to this. And Vince basically was like, well, I can't match it.
Yeah.
Because he couldn't. And all Vince said as a counter was, quote, WCW would never know what to do with Bret Hart.
Wasn't wrong.
It wasn't wrong, but we're going to get there. So when Vince was still figuring it all out, he chartered another plane to Calgary just a couple months later in October.
He wanted to see the bear.
Yeah, he wanted to see the bear. What bear?
The Hart family wrestling bear.
Oh, the wrestling bear, true. Yes.
Its carcass that lays under, the stairs. It was under the Porsche. That's where it lived. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it
That's
lived
so
under the
sweet.
Porsche.
That's sad. Don't say carcass on my show. So, what am I saying? Okay, so in this second counter offer that Vince is giving Bret, he said, according to Bret, he said that he offered him $10.5 million over 20 years.
Yeah, not a lot.
The first of that 20 years, this was the breaking down of it, the first 3 of the 20 would be spent still wrestling. The next 7 would be as a senior advisor, and then a decade of nothing, just no wrestling anywhere else. Like you're being paid, for 10 years, you're being paid to do nothing, basically.
Sucks.
Yeah, but he wanted to be like a consistent person in Vince's life. I think that he still valued their relationship, so they shook on it. He agreed. He said fine. And the plan was to like ingratiate Bret back into the storylines after this obviously long hiatus he had been taking. And Vince really wanted to milk it for all it was worth. And they started to go back and forth to build a tension leading up to Bret's comeback.
Okay.
But after a week, after this oral agreement of, $10.5 million over 20 years shook, the contract didn't arrive to Bret's, and he had been waiting for it at his home. And it was just a few days before Bret was set out to start the comeback that the contract arrived in Calgary. And it was a good thing that Bret was a smart, businessman, because his lawyer looked over it immediately, and Bret later wrote in a memoir that it was nothing like the agreement that they had made. He doesn't really pontificate on the details of that, but he is just saying that it is not the vibes, and he could not get a hold of the McMahons after this.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, and when he finally did, he got a hold of Linda, and they were like, whoops, sent you the wrong info, babe. We'll get you the right one, babes. And they sent the revised one, and that was that. But it's already starting, at every level, it's starting sketchy.
Yeah.
And this contract was crazy for the time because it included paid time off if he was injured, and that if he was to leave the company, he would have full creative control over how his character would do so in his last month of work, how he would be able to decide how he would get out of this space or whatever.
His departure.
Yes, exactly. And as the next year or so went on, Vince placed Bret in a series of storylines that kind of was like making Bret look like a sore loser and a baby. Like basically the storylines were going weird, and it was like forcing Bret to turn heel, but Bret wasn't really known for being a heel. He was known for being like a national treasure of Canada. And, Canada's sweethearts can't really ever be a heel. I mean, you could transform transcend the lines between the two, but I don't think you would ever be like a bad, like a villain.
There's no such thing as a bad Canadian.
Yeah, it's exactly what I mean. And Vince was pushing Bret to do the classic heel thing that any person does that's not from specifically the United States, is the I hate America thing.
Yeah, nationalism for your country.
Yes, which is really silly because he's from fucking Canada. It's not like,
North America still.
He's in North America. He's right above us. And while he was doing that in the ring, he is going into Sean this one specific time as has a promo in the middle of the ring, and he's really digging into him. And this is the time that he makes fun of Sean for that Playgirl magazine spread. Mm-hmm. And he said that he asked Sean for permission on that he wanted to go into him about that because it had been a big conversation, And when he had gone backstage afterwards, he said that Sean was basically looked like he was going to cry.
Yeah, he was beside himself
At this type of thing. And that was when Sean countered in his promo the next week with the Sunny Days comment and said, basically inferring that Bret Hart had been sleeping with the valet, Tammy Sitch, who went by Sunny. And it's weird that he would have said that, because something that we learned, many years down the line after this is that it was actually Sean that was having an affair with her.
Indeed, yeah.
And in that new Chris Candido episode of Dark Side of the Ring, it kind of gets into the details of it. Vince was egging on Sean and Bret, basically, with these increasingly specific digs that he forced the other to say to them, And when Bret had to get knee surgery in April of 97, although he needed to like rest and really like take his time to take care of his body, Vince literally ordered him to get back on the road immediately. And he had to listen to Shawn like talk shit about him all the time, basically. And Vince was instructing him to say these specific things. So it's like Vince talking shit about Bret through the voice of Shawn.
The guys,
Under the guise of him, exactly. It's like making Bret kind of fucking start to hate Shawn, I think.
Yeah.
I think that would be understandable. And so just before the June 9th showing of Raw in 1997, Shawn and Bret got into a fight in the dressing room, like a real ass fight. And Bret said that this is from Bret, I don't know, Bret tells stories like your 70-year-old uncle does. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be rude to Bret, I do love him, but he says that he, in this fight, grabbed Shawn by the hair and like swung him around like in a circle like Cesaro, which I just wrote K. And Vince then told Bret he basically like couldn't pay him what he promised.
Yeah, he just couldn't deliver on the deal that he had.
Exactly. He said that they were losing a lot of money, and although he promised he would pay him all of what he owed him, the $10 million, but it wouldn't be until the latter half of that 20 years that he had promised.
Stupid.
So it was like the same night, basically, I'm pretty sure, that Vince told Bret this, that him and Shawn had gotten into that physical fight backstage.
Perfect.
And it's very sketchy in the back, but like with all of these like kayfabe blurring moments happening, you know, with him and Shawn getting into a physical fight, not in front of fans, you know, and like this salaciousness that was beginning to bubble up in the company, Vince actually started a 1-900 number for fans to call in and get the hottest goss about the company at $1.49 a minute, which is very expensive, I think, in 1997.
Sounds outlandish.
We should Google it, but I won't. They just like basically I'm pretty sure that they knew the fight was going to be leaked to the burgeoning like popular chat rooms that were happening throughout the 90s, you know? So they wanted a piece of that fucking pie, and they were like, "Well, we'll tell you what happened if you just come in, you call this 1-900, you know, wrestle."
Yeah.
So right before a September segment of Raw, not too long after the last, we had just said that Hartford show was in June, Vince told Bret he wasn't going to be able to live up to the contract he signed at all.
Period.
He said that he would pay him someday, but he could not maintain the promise.
Yeah.
He encouraged Bret to sign the WCW contract. He literally was like, "You got to do what you got to do." Which I'm like, we could have saved so much time if he had just done it in the first place.
Agreed.
And Bret was still holding the title throughout all of this, which is so odd because he's being treated like they don't give a fuck about him, I think. At least from Bret's mouth, this is what we're getting.
Yes.
And Vince wanted to like very much prevent another Medusa throwing her title in the trash moment, like very badly. He knew what that looked like to the public, I guess, and you know, how it made him feel less than.
They're also hard for like the time-honored tradition of dropping the title when you leave the territory, but it's no longer a territory because it's national, so there is nothing right or wrong to do. Bret's entitled to feel how Bret feels, you know?
Totally, and especially when he's being like kind of gaslit.
Yeah, absolutely.
into staying with a company that's not providing him what he needs.
Yeah.
And he is like their top talent, but
Yeah.
but Vince keeps giving him these like worse storylines, like worse and worse. And I know that he said that WCW would never be able to know what to do with Bret Hart, but I feel like he kind of lost track of what to do with Bret Hart as well.
Fair.
So, sorry, back to the story. When Vince was like, "Okay, we're figuring this out. You have to drop the title to Shawn, and it's going to be in Canada." And Bret was like, "No, I'm not doing it. I'll drop the fucking title to Shawn. Fine, but it's not going to be in Canada because that's like a slap in the face to him." Mm-hmm. And Vince and Bret were debating kind of different times on varying options to end this WWE run of his.
Yeah, they really ran through
the gamut. Exactly. And per Bret's contract, he had every right to say no to any option that was thrown his way. And
veto.
Exactly. And he did. And Bret then says that he was trying to cool the feud between he and Shawn at this time because he knew that he was going to have to, end his career with this man, basically. And that he was like, you'll always be safe in the ring with me, dog. I care for you. I'm not going to like put you in danger. And according to Bret, Sean replied, like, I can't do the same. Like, I don't promise I'm going to be doing the same for you.
Thanks, but, get fucked.
Basically. And that's why Bret became like incredibly like indignant on not dropping the belt to him. And he was like, I do not want to work with this fucker. And so the pay-per-view that this is supposed to happen at is a day away. And Bret still isn't down to drop the belt. He had feelings about the ref, and he knew that like if the referee was in on this whole like debacle, they could all fuck him over, because he didn't know what was going to happen still until he got to the building that night.
Yeah.
And the ref, I can't remember his name right now.
I think it was Earl Hebner.
Hebner.
I believe.
When he flew in, he said that on his flight he had been in business class, and that a stewardess walked up to him and was like, you've been moved to first class. And he was like, what the fuck? And he looked, and his seatmate was Bret Hart. And Bret basically was like, please don't fuck me over. Like, just let me know what's going to happen, And he was like, I promise I won't do that to you. Like, why would I fuck you over, Because he didn't know what was going to happen. And when it comes down to what really would happen, there is no consensus on who decided that this is going to be what it was, a screw job. And from Ringmaster, the book I was talking about before, Josie Reisman writes, quote, it most likely wasn't Vince, whose trademark was latching onto others' biggest ideas and using them for his own ends, unquote, which I think is very astute. And we are obviously incredibly aware of the huge debate that is between arch enemies, Jim Cornette and Vince Russo, on who was the one to come up with the screw job. They heavily debate it to the camera that they stare into on Dark Side of the Ring in this episode, and
there's no conclusion.
There's no conclusion. They both said that they were the one to do it, and I don't know why you'd want to claim it so hard. It was in a good moment.
Fair enough.
And when Bret got into Montreal that night for the show, he was filming a documentary with a full crew called Wrestling with Shadows. That's not the crew's name, that was the documentary's name. And because of their presence, it really like changed a lot of the story of this, because there's audio, information.
They're wearing microphones, yeah.
Exactly. And some, sketchy things happened that night because of it. So because they were all like mic'd up for it, they got kind of an insane opportunity. And when Bret was brought into a meeting with Vince, he went in mic'd up without Vince knowing that, which is a lot.
Definitely.
He asked Vince basically like, can I please just win tonight? Just allow me to win tonight, and then the next day I will forfeit my belt, and the match that night would be set for like a no contest type of thing.
Yeah. A DQ or something.
Yeah, and there would be no winner. So can we just kind of table this for now, is like what he wanted to do. And I think that Vince agreed. He was like, fine, whatever, who gives a shit, right? And so as like they're literally all headed to start this matchup, the ref was pulled to the side by the executive Jerry Briscoe, and he told him basically, you have to ring the bell when Sean puts Bret in the sharpshooter.
Dun, dun, dun.
When this all happened and they had started the match, and Sean gets his legs up, doesn't know how to put them into a correct position of a sharpshooter. Bret has to fix it for him.
Yep.
And then he gets him into the position to, milk it for all it's worth. And Bret said that at that moment, Vince shows up ringside and starts yelling, ring the fucking bell.
Yeah.
Like over and over again. And when Bret goes to counter, the bell rings. And in the air, he traces WCW to the fans. And afterwards, he smashed, a lot of money worth of
monitors and
speakers and stuff like that.
Everything, yeah. A $100,000 headset he threw into the audience, he said.
Yeah, and then he infamously spit right in Vince McMahon's face.
Yes, he did.
And when Bret went into the dressing room after all of this, Sean was standing there.
Sean, you weren't in on that?
Fucking idea. I got no place. God's my fucking witness. My hands are clean of this one, I swear to God. He's yelling at me out there. I gave him the belt when I came back here. I will not have any part of it.
And so the fucking documentary crew is still rolling. It's so insane. I cannot believe the symbiotic.
The timing of it.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah,
very
insane.
symbiotic. And Bret asked him, he's like, what did you do? What was your hand in this? What, tell me please. And Sean replied, no, my hands are clean of this.
He started crying like a baby too.
And apparently Bret's then wife went up to Triple H and was berating him for knowing about it in the first place. And The Undertaker was incredibly mad. He said that he went to Vince's office and demanded that he go talk to Bret afterwards, because I think Vince had scurried away after the loogie and he was just probably planning on hiding out. And Mark Calloway wasn't going to let him do it.
Nope.
They'll go back to the hotel and have a big laugh, right? A few beers, Just remember someday, Hunter, what goes around comes around.
So Vince went into the dressing room and Bret is taking a shower. I wanted to quote from Ringmaster, the book here, but I don't have my copy, so I'm just going to try to remember. Bret's taking a shower. He hears Vince's voice. He comes out and he's fully naked. And he's like, you get your fucking ass out of here or I'm going to fucking punch you in the face. Do you remember what happens next?
Well, he says, I'm going to finish my shower, and if you're still here when I'm done, then I'm going to hurt you, basically.
Then that's on you.
Yeah, it's on you. And then they say he takes, a comfortable shower, too, 20, 30 minutes, after a match. He didn't rush it by any means.
Takes his time.
And then Vince was still there after, waiting,
He's just looking at him in the eye, just I guess probably knowing what's about to come, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And basically Bret says that they locked up like it's a fucking wrestling match. And, Bret in this very 70-year-old uncle way, as I said before, is 20 years. And then there's punches and gave him a full-on uppercut, everybody says. A straight up uppercut.
Knocked him right out.
You knocked out Vince McMahon with a punch?
And I told him to get out.
And I was confused by that because Vince has a black eye and all the things. And I'm like, did he give him an uppercut to the eye? I'm a little confused by that.
He probably got a couple jabs in there.
Maybe so. But so after that, obviously Bret, ceased his relationship with the WWF. This was it. And Bret was going on talk shows and talking about, all of this shit that happened. And
the business too. Yeah.
The business itself. He's showing their deck of cards basically. Yeah. And then in response to that, Vince was in an interview with JR, and it was on Monday Night Raw, and he comes across incredibly cold and calculated, and
which is so unlike Vince McMahon.
Yeah, exactly. This is what led to the Vince as CEO asshole.
Yeah, the heel character.
Exactly. And because leading into this, Bret had a feud with Steve Austin, and Vince was slowly starting to become more of a maniacal Donald Trump type character at that time, and kind of just pushing for himself, not for anybody else. And he was slowly transforming into this, maniacal person that the fans would see. And at that time, he had actually been a consistent, commentator or announcer. Mm-hmm. And that night was one of the first that he wasn't. And apparently, in, 2020 is, hindsight is 2020, sorry. He was that should have been a, indicator to me that something was off. But, so basically, this pushed Vince over the edge into becoming the full-on McMahon dictator that he would continue to be for the next decade.
Yeah, and inspired the whole... he's an insane individual and just kind of doubled down. He's like, you guys think I'm an asshole? I'll show you an asshole,
Yeah, I'll show you a monster.
Yeah.
And that's where it really wraps up.
Yeah.
It doesn't have a clean ending because it was just life, and life ends jaggedly, when you rip a paper in half.
Yeah, Bret didn't really get his, day in the sun at WCW. They kind of fumbled the bag. And he left on bad terms at WWF, so it was just kind of a weird situation all over,
Totally, wrestling royalty, turned to dust. They didn't really give him the I think, the credit he deserved. I mean, they definitely give it to him now. I'll say
Yeah,
that.
they've realized their wrongdoings. But,
Yes,
you know.
and they're all obsessed with him. So,
Yeah.
But that's mostly it.
Cool.
Thank you so much for being here, Kreider.
Absolutely.
I love you.
I love you.
And I wanted to say thank you to anyone who's listening. Wrestling Wench is written and created by me, Alexa Pruitt, and the music is by who you just heard, Kreider Dane at Helter Skelter Music Productions. If you liked what you heard, please join me again. Making this is truly a joy for me, and I hope to continue to be able to. Thank you.